I did something really funny today. Not so funny in the moment, but I recorded this entire podcast, except for the fact that I never hit record. And what was interesting about this is I got to, in real time, practice so much of what I'm talking about today right after I just talked about it. So, welcome. And here's to hoping this episode is better than my first non-recorded episode. It's also a great reminder that no matter how professional we are, no matter how long we've been in business, we all make mistakes. We are still human. And I found myself frustrated that I had wasted time, but then instantly pulled back to gratitude for the space in my day to be able to have a second chance. And I think that's something important that we have to always remember in entrepreneurship. I believe that being an entrepreneur is a privilege. I believe that when we run our businesses with intentionality, that we get to truly create the lives that we want. And it's only when we forget that we have the power to control our circumstances, that we have the power to control our reality, that things don't feel intentional. So today we're talking about how to move from a state of reactivity to a state of intentionality, and really how this helps you to stop losing your shit on everybody around you and to stop feeling like you're losing your shit or you're losing your sanity at all times. This is something that is common, probably more than most business owners would like to admit, but it is very real. And it's a conversation that I have very frequently with clients about how to proceed, how to handle things when it feels like a million things are coming at you, and how to truly create a life and days and a business that feels intentional versus feeling like you are just doing a bunch of to-dos all the time. So, welcome. Let's first talk about and clarify the difference between reactivity and intentionality. Reactivity is built in our subconscious. Reactivity is impulsive. It is when something happens, whether that is an email, a question, a message from team, a thought from a partner. It is when something happens and we react. We view it as a response in that time, but we are truly just reacting to that based upon who we've always been and what we've always done. So this is what you'll hear referred to as like a knee-jerk reaction, right? So reactivity is, you know that you're being reactive when you feel like you are being controlled by your circumstances. You know that you are struggling with reactivity when you feel emotionally heightened all the time, where you feel like a sense of urgency at all times, where you're living almost in that state of fight or flight, where there is a lot of stress and worry and anxiousness. And because of this, when something or anything happens, you typically will have a bigger response to that, be that anger or resentment or crying or some sort of higher level emotion. When you are in a chronic state of reactivity, everything feels heavier and harder. So typically for my clients, when they've been reactive for a really long time, something that could be perceived as somebody else who is maybe more emotionally regulated could happen. But when it happens to them, it feels like they start to spiral and catastrophize, right? So let's say this is an issue with a client or something happens in the business that didn't go your way, right? When you're emotionally regulated, when you're intentional, There is a thought process that happens. There is data gathering. There is moving back into a state of observation. When you're reactive, it's just like you feel defeated. You start to spiral. You start to think that maybe your business will fail or fall apart. And so this is really what reactivity looks like. And again, it's just being very impulsive. It's just moving through your day without even recognizing you're moving through your day. You're just doing things and reacting to things all day long. And this is so common because there are so many moving parts between business and motherhood. There's always stuff coming at you, right? And so there is part of this that is not within our control and part that is. And the part that's within our control is how we respond to these things. So if your kid yells at you, you can yell back, or you can, center yourself, get calm, get on their level, and try to help them emotionally regulate. So then you can create a conversation. Obviously, that requires a level of emotional regulation in yourself. And that's why this is really about decreasing our reactivity and learning to be intentional so that we can form better relationships and better relationships in every area of our life, whether that's with our partner, with our children, but especially for team and client retention, right? Because we want to be good leaders both inside and outside of our homes. So intentionality, which is what we're going to move into and away from reactivity. Intentionality is where things are done with intent. There is purpose, there's purposefulness, there is thought, there is a conscious awareness of why you're saying or doing the thing that you're doing versus just having that knee-jerk reaction. So it's very careful consideration, or it is a filtration process that you go through before making a choice. It is taking space, thoughtful space between when something comes at you and when you respond to that thing. And living with intentionality is so hard for business owners, especially as mothers, because again, the sheer amount of moving pieces, the sheer amount of decisions, the sheer amount of questions and moving parts that are associated with being a mom in business. And so oftentimes we are most reactive because we always feel like everything is urgent and we simply don't have time. And so we're trying to get things off of our plate as quick as possible. So in business and in life, longevity and sustainability need to be at the forefront. When you created your business, you probably didn't create your business with the intention to only be in business temporarily. You want to continue to be in business. You want to continue to make an impact. You want to continue to make money that creates financial freedom for you and your family. And so it is important for us to understand the reason why we need to be intentional. We generally don't make change in our life unless we understand the importance of it. And so now that you know the difference between reactivity and intentionality, I want to express to you why it is so important for you to be more intentional with the way that you are moving throughout your days. When we are not intentional and when we are living in this chronic reactive state, the reality of what this does to our mental and physical well-being is it's going to drain us and it's going to drown us. And so oftentimes this will be like the burnout cycle, right? We become apathetic. We become numb to what's going on. We don't feel any sort of feelings except for maybe some very heightened states of, we might be crying, we might be really angry, we might be catastrophizing. And so this happens a lot. When we aren't intentional, we will likely contribute to the burnout cycle. And at some point in time, we will end up in a space to where we don't feel good. We don't feel good mentally. We don't feel good emotionally. And truly, a lot of my clients have struggled with feeling defeated or feeling depressed or feeling like they simply just can't carry on, and they don't know how they could not carry on because they're feeding their families, right? And so we have to be intentional if we want our business to be sustainable. We have to be intentional with the decisions that we make, how we treat people, how we speak to people, if we want to be in business for a long time. And that's important to you, and it's important for me. And so this intentionality has to be something that we prioritize. And so the question becomes, okay, Kelsey, I hear you. I need to stop living in this reactive state. I need to stop just like trying to juggle all these balls and like getting stuff thrown at me and throwing it right back and feeling like I'm in this. It's almost like you're in this space of having to catch more balls than you have hands, right? And so you feel like you have to get rid of one so you can catch another one. And that is just this cycle of like always reacting to everything around us that contributes to us feeling burnout, us feeling overwhelmed, us feeling stressed, us feeling anxious. So to move to a place of intentionality and knowing that intentionality is something that we cannot make negotiable. Intentionality is something that we have to build into our day-to-day, whether that's a small decision or a big decision. How do we do that? How do we move to a space to where we become intentional people who make intentional decisions? And so the best process that you can do to become more intentional is what I'm going to take you through now. And what I know is that when we have been in business, especially for many years, it is so easy to become disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from the people we love, disconnected from our own emotions. And you're truly just going through the motions of the day to day. So instead of being a business owner who is this creator of your life, you become a box checker. You become a person who checks to-dos every day. You become somebody who shows up to the office and sees patients or sees clients all day and then goes home, and that just is on repeat. And there's no deeper meaning. That deeper meaning is lost, right? And this will result in us really not feeling passionate about our work anymore, which we see a lot, where it's like, making all this money, why does it feel like this, right? So in order to bring back that deeper meaning, in order to start to be intentional, we first have to have that deeper meaning again. We need to go back to your vision and your values. So your first step here is going to be all about figuring out what your vision and your values are. You likely had a vision when you started your business, and you've probably lost sight of it. And that happens when we become overwhelmed with responsibilities. And so again, between work and motherhood, this is easy. So we're just doing to do rather than doing knowing that it's tied to something bigger. That something bigger is what we want to bring back here. Getting clear on, at this point in this season of your life, what is the bigger vision that you have for yourself and for your business, for yourself as a leader, for yourself as a mother, for your business and your impact and your legacy? What is that vision? And kind of recreating that from the space that you're in now and allowing yourself to play in that bigger vision and what that vision could be for you. Because again, we lose sight of what our potential is and what is next for us and what can be bigger for us when we're so stuck in the day-to-day responsibilities. So you're going to clarify your vision, and then you're going to clarify your values. Your value system is something that we need to revisit on a frequent basis, because your value system becomes part of this filtration process of the way that you make decisions and the way that you treat people, the way that you show up in your day to day. If it's very important to you, one of my biggest values is freedom, obviously. And so anytime I feel frustrated or resentful or angry, it's usually tied to something that's taking away my freedom, or that I have perceived as taking away my freedom. And so that gives me the power back to say, okay, well, if that's taking away my freedom, what can I change about that thing to make it feel like it's contributing to my freedom? And so knowing what your personal values are and being able to be clear on what are the things that are most important to you. For me, freedom, honesty, integrity, loyalty. These are things that I am deeply tied to. And so they show up in the way that I live every day. They show up in the way that I speak to my clients and speak to the people that I love. And so having those clearly in my mind, it serves as almost boundaries for myself of like, this is how I promised that I would operate. And so I need to stay within those promises. So your vision, clarifying your vision and your values is going to be your first step in moving towards intentionality in your day to day. And once you have those things, you're going to have this renewed, refreshed sense of this feeling, this sense of being that's like, wow, okay, now that I know who I am and what's most important to me, and now that I can see and feel again what this is all for, now what? Right? So then we get to reevaluate what our goals are and reestablish our priorities. So it's vision, values, goals, prioritizing. And in this order, because our goals are so often based on what we see other people doing or what we've been told that we should do, versus basing it upon what we know we really want. This is hard because what most people don't recognize about setting goals is that you're saying that you want something that you haven't yet experienced, which means you actually don't know if you want that thing. And so there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty, which is why goal setting is like a huge market for people, but it's also just something that a lot of people fail around because there's not, our brains do not like change. And even if it's change for the better, be that a goal for, whether it's more clients, more money, more impact, whatever it looks like for you, it's still unknown. And so our brains are like, no, but you know how to make this amount of money. You don't know who you'll be when you make that amount of money. And so in this, it's important to recognize that your goals that you're setting are going to be based on biases that you have. And so sometimes one of the most important things you can do to set goals is first identify what you don't want. And I have a lot of my clients do this because then we can reverse that, right? So if we can identify that you don't want to feel overwhelmed and burnout and like you're pulled in a million different pieces, that's great. So that to me tells me that you have a goal of more structure, better boundaries, and those are things that we can create tactical pieces into your business, into the way that you structure your offers and your services, the hours that you work, etc. So if you're having a hard time creating goals, start with what you don't want. So goals, and then prioritizing those goals, understanding what is of highest and biggest importance to you, and knowing that that is now tied to that vision and values makes it feel like a higher level of accountability towards that. So values, vision, values, goals, prioritizing goals based upon what you are most drawn to, based upon to what the biggest need is, based upon to what the highest value is, based upon, it could be the season that you're in right now of your life as well. And so that is going to be your process to create intentionality, because from that, then you're going to say, okay, well, now that I have this goal of decreasing my stress and my overwhelm and my anxiety and being able to run a bigger, more profitable business without bringing all of that reactivity and stress with me. Now that I know that that's my goal, then I can create these tactical pieces of things like, setting up my CEO schedule, getting organized in my back end, making sure I have the right team members in the right roles, and looking at, how I operate as a leader and how I'm communicating, what my boundaries are, what the standards are for clientele, looking at all these pieces, which, by the way, I just have to say that these are the kind of like intricacies that we are going into inside the Freedom Collective. And so what's really beautiful about this very intentional space that I've crafted is that I am bringing in women from all different industries. And so what this creates is it's not an echo chamber of everybody doing the same thing. It's everybody with similar goals on a similar path, with similarities of being a business owner and a mother, but different expertise, different perspectives. And this is truly what masterminds should be. And so if you haven't looked into the Freedom Collective Mastermind and you are a mom running a business and you want to run your business with intentionality, you want things to feel aligned to your personal values and your bigger vision, and you're not sure how to shift into that, we address everything from the internal change that needs to be made within you to become this business owner that you are envisioning yourself as and to reach that higher potential. And then we address all the little parts that need to change along with that, be that your services, offerings, and everything that I just went through. So I just felt like that was an appropriate place to mention that, because if you're like, man, I really need to know the support that I need, and I really need an extra set of eyes to get organized and to professionalize and to call in the right type of clientele. These are things that we're doing inside the Freedom Collective. So we'll put the link for the page where you can learn more and the application, etc., in the show notes for you. So after you have moved through your vision and your values and your goals and prioritizing those goals, and you're clear on these tactical pieces and these things that need to change, then you have a plan. You've curated a plan for yourself. And so when you are moving throughout your day, you want to align with that plan. So how do we align with that plan? We align with that plan by utilizing mindfulness. And so mindfulness is, I'm sure, a term that you have heard, and it means exactly what it says, which is to be mindful, right? Because again, we have become almost robotic in the way that we move throughout our day. And so if we're bringing mindfulness back, this means being conscious, being aware, and being present. And so in order for us to do that, and what this actually looks like as a practice, is we're going to utilize the time between a stimulus and a response. And we utilize this in the way of something comes in, right? And say that's a question from a team member, and you feel some type of way in your body, right? It makes you mad, it makes you upset, whatever it is. And you feel that. And instead of responding, which would be a reaction from that place of like, well, that shouldn't have happened, or you shouldn't have done that, or whatever your response would be, we're going to actually take space. So this space is going to vary based upon how heightened you are emotionally and what you have available. Because again, I think the reason why most people don't do this, who are in my position or my client's position, who have a million responsibilities and businesses and kids and stuff's always coming at you, is time, right? Time is always the biggest thing. It's the biggest reason why all of my clients are like, I don't feel like I could add this to my plate right now when we're talking about private partnership or the mastermind. And I'm like, that's the problem. Your perception of asking for help is that it's adding something to your plate, when realistically, I believe that my job is to help you remove things from your plate so that you feel more intentional. And so when we're always telling ourselves that we don't have time, we actually need to address that issue, because that issue comes from a society that is built on instant gratification and truly having this need for speed and urgency that is false, that is not built on anything substantial. It's just built on the belief system that we have that faster is better. So if you're like, Kelsey, I don't have time, I have a million things coming at me, I hear you, but actually you do. Actually you do. Right? That urgency that you feel is self-imposed. And so when we're utilizing mindfulness, I want you to take time, be that 5 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 minutes, whatever it is, in between when something comes in. Just because an email comes in doesn't mean you need to respond right then. Just because an email comes in doesn't mean you need to read it right then. Just because a message comes in or something, a fire is happening, depending on the level of the fire, right? It's usually not as urgent as we make it. And that urgency that we feel contributes to the reactivity. So what this looks like is you're just taking space, you're creating space between whatever the stimulus is and your response. And this is going to allow you within that space is your time to become conscious and aware and remember your goals and your values and your vision, right? So if you're talking to a team member and a team member, expresses something to you that makes you feel angry and you want to get defensive, and you know that one of your highest values is, let's say like heart-led leadership or empathetic leadership, then are you going to spout off something rude or unkind or lacking compassion? No, you're going to remember, okay, this person just said something. I want to get defensive right now and stand up for myself and protect myself, right? Because that's what our brains do. And instead of moving from that place, instead of typing back a message or recording a voice note back to that person, you will have space where you're like, okay, how would I respond as an empathetic leader? How would I respond knowing that freedom is my highest value? How would I respond knowing that if I violate this boundary that I've set, that's going to actively take away from the flexibility that I've set as a value for me? It gives you space to think. And again, we have that space. We're just not taking it. And that's something that we have control over. So I'm inviting you to think differently about how you think about space and how you think about your timely responses, and inviting you into a new way of thinking of, actually, when something comes at me, I don't need to respond right then, right? So if you think about in motherhood, if one of my kids is crying or throwing a tantrum about something, as long as they're not in danger, if I'm emotionally heightened in that moment, I can walk away and take some breaths and then come back and then be able to co-regulate with them. Versus just because they're crying doesn't mean that I need to do something right then and there, right? It's oftentimes our need to have to do something right then and there is built from our belief system of trying to please other people or please society or live up to certain expectations. So I know that was a big spiel on the last one, but it's so important. And that's what I want you to practice. And this practice is something that I want you to work through every single day. Anytime a question comes in, anytime a message comes in, anytime something comes at you and it's a ball being thrown at you, you can catch and you can hold the ball just for a second to think about how you, who is aligned with those values that you hold, how do you respond? And that's going to move us into a place of intentionality. That's going to move us into a place of responsiveness. And then we're going to gradually just start to feel ourselves become lighter and feel better and feel like, even though we may have as many things getting thrown at us as we had before, it doesn't feel the same. And that's the goal here. The goal is not to create some, business that is so simplified that there are not a lot of moving parts, and to fire all our team members and to become a solopreneur again, or whatever. People have a million ideas about what this looks like. The goal is always to learn how to be and respond differently in the same types of situations, and then to look at those situations and evaluate within those situations what is in our control and what we can change. And so this is why we're always looking at you as the leader and how you operate and how you communicate. And then we also look at the external changes that need to be made in order for you to operate at that highest, fullest potential. So that is what I have for you today. I hope that you enjoy this episode. I hope that you recognize the importance of intentionality. And if you have questions about this, I want to hear how you practice this. I would love to hear. I love messages from you guys just to know that this is resonating and teaching you and helping you grow. And then if you're interested in the Freedom Collective Mastermind and you really want to be a part of this tight-knit group of women, the link will be below for that. But I'm also happy to set up a call, answer any questions that you have, because this is going to be a very, very beautiful space. And I would love for you to be a part of it if it feels aligned to where you want to go in your life and your business. So thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next week.